This episode is presented by Open Fortune. They are giving brands the world's most creative ad canvas, which is actually the fortune cookie that you have known and loved. They created relationships with over 47,000 restaurants, reaching 99% of zip codes, and have created something really cool to write the fortunes for any of these brands like ZipRecruiter, Duolingo, Chime, and Zelle. And just big thanks to them for having us on this yacht and having this amazing conversations in Miami. So without further ado, we'll get into the episode. From diving deep into the intricate world of consumer and market knowledge at Procter Gamble to leveraging analytics at 8451 and orchestrating brand magic at Kroger, Mandy Rassi has proven her unparalleled acumen in the marketing arena. Her psychology and women's studies background from Miami University in Ohio seems to have given her an edge in understanding the very core of consumers. Today, she's channeling her prowess as the SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Michaels, spearheading marketing and loyalty for a $5 billion plus empire that seamlessly spans over 1,200 stores and a robust e-commerce platform. Amanda, with the trajectory that only many can dream of, I must ask you, how the fuck did you get that job?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, where to start?
I think I want to start with our guests, bringing them back to college. Okay. And like that decision process to go to Miami and Ohio, because it's one of the first decisions you really make as an adult.
Yeah.
So what did that decision look like for you?
So I'm from Cincinnati. So Miami is not that far. For those who don't know, it's like an hour away from where I grew up. And I think it was like, it's a good school. It's relatively close to home. And honestly, I could afford it, was a big piece of it. And I was an arts and science major. So like you said, I studied psychology. I actually never took a business class, which was kind of wild. And I had sort of put myself through school and got to the end and should have gone on to grad school. But I needed to work for a little while first, which is how then I ended up at P&G, who gave me a chance, even though I literally knew nothing about business at the time. And that kind of put me on the course that I am now.
Very cool. And I find your background really fascinating with women's studies and psychology. How did you bring that into, what you do today?
So I think inherently I've always been curious about people and culture. So from a psychology point of view, obviously it is very much how people think, why they behave the way they do. Women's studies was a little more anthropological in terms of looking at the societal patterns and cultural patterns that then shape behavior. So I think the combination of those two things has served me well. As you think about marketing, so much of it is just actually understanding humans and how they make decisions and how you can influence decisions to maybe go in a different direction, and put that in service of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Marketing has been a lot of fun for me because, one, you still get to be around people and think about the strategic questions, but also get to have kind of a foot in the world of sort of art and science with the creativity and then also analytical pieces. So yeah, I think it just sort of maybe teed me off in that way, and then I learned the business stuff along the way.
So you said you didn't take a business class, which is awesome. Like, I love the figure it out mentality, right? Like, so right out of college, where did you get your first job, especially in business, and how did they care that you didn't have business classes, or were they just like, we see, your potential and like, let's get it?
So I went to Procter Gamble, and their whole mentality is we will train you. And they have an amazing training program and really hire, usually right out of school with the intent that like you're gonna have your career here. So they invest a lot in training, not just when you first come in, but really at all the key junctures as you move up. And for the function I was in, which was called Consumer and Market Knowledge, which then I think is still called that, but it's sort of morphed into more of an analytics and sort of data science route. But at the time it was Consumer and Market Knowledge, which was a lot about consumer insights, strategy, innovation. And so for that, having a background in psychology actually was somewhat of a fit. And then I learned all the business stuff there. Luckily, I had a very good patient, first finance manager who I worked with, who explained a lot of the basics of the P&L and how that works. We owned the volume forecast on the business, which for me was a very good training ground and just starting to understand the levers of really what drives the business most effectively, where does the risk actually sit. So then over time, I just sort of built those skills. And honestly, I think it was a gift that I landed at P&G because there's formal training, but also just you get to work with some of the best brand builders in the world. And most of them are very patient in terms of mentoring and training the next generation of people. So you get a ton of just hands-on coaching and development every single day. That probably I took a little bit for granted at the time. Now I appreciate it much more now that I've gone on to other things and maybe sit on the other side now of also realizing like it takes a lot of time and effort to invest in other people that way. But honestly, I kind of feel like I just got the career jackpot coming out of college that somebody was willing to give me a chance, knowing that I probably didn't have every skill that would be required, but that I would pick it up along the way.
And so what kind of data and like, how did that play a role when you're like actually like learning these numbers? Do you remember like a first project where you were like stumped and then kind of finally like figured it out?
Maybe not so much on data because psychology has a lot of data in terms of like running studies, and a lot of what we were doing at that point at P&G was either partnering with the marketers on things like concept testing for new products, different packaging that we might do. I was working on Old Spice, which at the time was the only all-male brand in the company, and it was not Old Spice like it is now. It was like what you maybe historically would think of as Old Spice. It was not cool.
Because most of our listeners, right, are in the age between 18 and 24 and think of Old Spice as Terry Crews. What was Old Spice?
It was not that. It was like your grandpa's aftershave brand, like the whistle. And at the time, it was pre-Gillette acquisition, so it really was the only male brand. And P&G knows their consumer really well, but all of it was female consumers. So we were sort of this like rogue group of like, go figure out how we do anything with this brand that is all about men. And it was a lot of just scrappy stuff because we didn't have databases, we didn't have comparisons, we didn't have a lot of the stuff you have at your fingertips at P&G. And it was a lot of us who were just young and relatively new. So it was just mainly figuring out guy culture. And that was sort of like exactly your audience is the target audience. It's kind of that like teens into early 20s, or at least it was at the time. So it was a lot of like, how can we take this really old brand and make it cool? Which no data will even exactly tell you how to do that. So there was a good amount of like gut. We had an amazing marketing director who was leading it, a woman named Alex Keith, who I think took a lot of creative risks, which is how you got Terry Crews and some of that. And the agency was amazing. But yeah, that was some of the first stuff that I worked on there. And then I went to the laundry business, which was a totally different ballgame, and spent many, many years doing that.
So Procter Gamble has a lot of different brands. Like, which are some that like laundry list of names that you worked for?
So on the brand side, I started on Old Spice and Secret. Then I went to the laundry business. So Tide, Gain, Bounce, Downy were some of the big ones. Globally, it would have been like Ariel, Bold, Lenore. And then
when you're marketing to everybody, you're kind of marketing to nobody. Like, how did that kind of play out in your strategy for the laundry biz?
Yeah, so laundry was an interesting one. Take laundry in the US because you have big brands, right? Tide's $1 billion brand, Gain's $1 billion brand. So you do have to appeal to a lot of people. The problem is with that big of a portfolio, also having cheer, you needed to have niches because otherwise, you're right, you would be not relevant to anyone and you'd cannibalize the heck out of each other. So for Tide, it was very much about understanding the DNA of that brand is about cleaning and stain removal. So really being true to the customer for whom that is the most important thing. And all of the R&D and formulation, everything needed to be in service of stain removal and being cleaner. Gain, we called the consumer for Gain the Gainiacs, all about the scent. And so really the design target for that was people who like, it had to be clean, but maybe not to the level of what a Tide customer would want. And their way of knowing it's clean would be purely about the scent. And how long does the scent on the clothes last? A lot of technology from that. So really understanding two very different customers both really big brands in the same category, but actually the way the product needed to look. The Tide advertising was very much what worked was category leader. Let me do a side-by-side of the stain coming out, and that customer really reacted to that. Where the Gain customer, you could lead with a lot more humor, a little more challenger brand like, don't take yourself so seriously, and that's what resonated for that customer. And then that allowed both brands to grow as long as you stayed true to what that brand should be about.
Gotcha. And so inside Procter & Gamble, you're going from brand to brand. Like, what do those switches look like internally for you?
So I love change, and I would say I probably actively seek out either things that are transformation, new and different, / just after a few years, I'm ready to do something else. I think a lot of people at P&G are that way, and when I was there, you would move every 2 to 3 years, basically, to a new assignment. What I loved about that is I like figuring out the new different things, so I did a couple of roles in new business development. I moved to the North America retail team and spent a number of years across the customer teams there. I think I like to be on a steep learning curve, and probably at multiple points took jobs I wasn't 100% ready for, and just sort of felt like I'm going to go and figure it out. And that's where I tend to be happiest. If I come into it and feel like, oh, I already know how to do this, or I've been doing the same thing for a long time, I don't think that's really where I do my best work, and it's hard for me to be as excited about that.
It's interesting because one of my favorite quotes from this guy, Darren K. Roberts, who's actually live in Texas. He ran their sports administration program and it was an NFL coach, but he always says like stay in the deep end, and that reminds me of like kind of like always kind of changing and like putting yourself in that struggling place. Like I'm curious because I haven't worked for a company that big. But when you're doing those internal changes from brand to brand, is that something that you're seeking out, or is that something that like one of the SVPs of marketing is just like, I'm going to poach you from here because I think you'd be a better fit?
Some combination of both. So at P&G, there is a clear career pathing process, which is great. So you get a say of like, these are the next assignments that I would like. Your boss and mentors are also going to have a process for that of like, okay, we know the roles that are going to be opening on a similar timeline.
Gotcha.
And usually it's more of like, what are the skills that you want? So at one point I had been doing the global brand side and I wanted to get more retail experience. So then there was a period of time where it's like, okay, when a role like XYZ opens up, then that could be a move for me, because I had said, hey, I want to go do the retail thing. I'd prefer to stay in North America, which then kind of knocks it down to like, okay, there's roles in the food channel, the club channel, and when one of these comes open, then you would be sort of on the slate of candidates to get that. So it's kind of cool that you get a say, but then you also have a lot of advocacy from people above you because there's a robust career development process. I would say other places I've gone since then, like very few companies have that. Yeah. So I think more often you have to seek it out yourself. But in that way, I feel like I was just very blessed that there was a ton of support.
Was there one campaign, you spent how many years? 8, 9?
At P&G?
Yeah.
Almost 14.
14.
Yeah.
So you spent 14 years at P&G. Like how did you see the company grow and change over those 14 years?
The company changed a ton. I mean, one, just the growth of brands, right? So the company acquired Gillette, which was a huge change, and brought some different skill sets. Obviously,
and was a competitor prior.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was one of those where I remember I was on a business trip and we like all came down in the morning and like the front page of the paper was like P&G acquires Gillette. We were like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. So that was a big one. We had a number of different CEOs and they all sort of bring their own bent, but I would say the constants were being customer driven. Obviously what changed in the time frame that I was there is data science, machine learning, all of that really brought a different bent, and digital, right? When I first went there, we were talking about the TV copy and the print ads, like I'm old-ish, and really agonizing over those things. And then by the time I left, it was very much social and, how are we thinking about programmatic, and email was a much bigger deal. So really learning about how to build brands, still with the core tenets of being grounded in your audience and the insights and your KPIs, but having a lot more tools in the toolbox to figure out how you get there.
It's always constantly evolving. I feel like most industries are, but especially in marketing, right, and social, like the ground is always changing underneath your feet, and it's like how you adapt to it, which most brands, especially in P&G, did a great job at. So it's funny, we were speaking to the CMO of ADT earlier today, and he talked a lot about like pivot points and major turning points in his career. But like, obviously, after 14 years, you decided to leave. What was, what made that the right move for you, and how did you know that it was the right time to like kind of call it quits?
I don't know if you ever know 100% that it's the right time, but I felt enough that it was the right time. One, I'd had a lot of experiences at P&G. So I had done the global brand side. I'd worked on bigger brands, smaller brands, new business,
retail. And were you always
retail.
based in the same?
Always based in Cincinnati. So I had a couple of global jobs where I traveled a lot. And then I had retailer teams that were all over the US, but always based in Cincinnati, which was nice. But I feel like I had sort of done a lot of what I could do there. And Cincinnati is a small city, and I got connected in with 8451, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Kroger company. It had been dunnhumby USA. Kroger had bought out sort of the data science and loyalty arm. And made them part of Kroger. So about 6 months into that, they were figuring out their journey, and I had gotten connected in with their then CEO. More like they were thinking about how they had all this data, and it was really good at a rear view mirror.
And what year is this?
This was 2016.
Okay.
So at this point, right, this is still like even early days of personalization and data science and machine learning. And they had all of that stuff, but weren't yet using it to drive bigger picture strategy at Kroger. And so I had sort of gotten connected in through a prior P&G mentor. And I had worked in the grocery channel, so I kind of knew folks at dunnhumby and at Kroger. And it sort of just turned into a job. It was one of those things of like, okay, we're going to stand up a team that could go do this. Like, would you have interest to do it? And I love the idea of having a white sheet of paper to come in and figure out something really new. I obviously had done the big company thing, and while 8451 was part of Kroger, they were really run, especially at that point, as a small company of its own in a different building. It was less than 400 people at the time. Like, we were doing HR systems on like an Excel spreadsheet because we were less than a year out of this split. So it was just a chance to try something totally new and different and have a bigger playing field to sort of build something from the ground up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting going from such a massive company to like 400, which is like still like, it sounds like a startup.
Totally.
Startup
Yes.
vibe. Like, what was expectation versus reality taking that gig?
I don't know if I knew exactly what to expect. I thought, it's going to be smaller. We'll be able to move faster, and we're going to have all of this data, which P&G has a lot of data, but retail is a whole other ballgame of having all that transaction data and loyalty program data. So I had lots of expectations of what we'd be able to do from that point of view. But I think what I didn't fully understand going into it is the culture of a tech and data science company is very different than a CPG, obviously very brand and consumer driven company. And I learned a ton. In the 2 years that I spent there, I will say I got to know the head of data science very well. And just learned a lot from him and his team in terms of like predictive modeling, and a lot of what I was doing was still more like consumer and strategy. So it would be like, I see this thing happening in culture and I have a hypothesis. Can you find anything in your data about that? Or they would see something in the data but not know why. And then my team would spend a lot of the time trying to figure out, like, why is that thing happening? What's the thing behind it that's driving it that could then, play into a different strategy, primarily for Kroger. They have the CPG side, but I was pretty much focused on the Kroger side.
Oh, that is fascinating, honestly. And then I'm curious too, like, then you take the head of brand marketing at Kroger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so after 2 years at 8451, Kroger was going through a big transformation.
And I'm curious too, like, you went from P&G, and this is where you're creating the products, right? And then it's the place where they're selling the products. Like, how did that help you, like, understand that you're a consumer and, like, create your marketing strategy for Kroger?
So I feel like I had good foundations. P&G has what they call the brand building framework that will serve you well anywhere you go in marketing, I fully believe, which is just you start with the who, right? Who is the audience? What are the customer needs? What are the pain points?
Sounds like you got like an MBA, a real life MBA from
Literally, yes.
P&G.
Yes, and
That's awesome.
And really to a huge level of detail on the strategy of like, is the choice right? Is the choice specific enough? Do you know how you're going to measure that thing? And so those sorts of frameworks served me really well at Kroger. And then, you know, sort of being on the retail side, I had done the retail part of P&G for about 7 years. So I understood enough in terms of some of like the pricing and promo and, you know, shelf space and
Sure.
store reinvention and things like that. But from a brand point of view, a few things I learned differently in retail. I think P&G gives you good consumer foundations. The speed at which you have to go at retail, especially in grocery, because it's an every week, many times a week, sometimes trip for people, is you've got to move and you can't agonize over every bit of the strategy. You've kind of got to know you're directionally in the right place and then know when to just like take a leap and, you know, hope it gets there.
Absolutely. And I'm curious too, because one thing that I feel like head of brands struggle with as well, I mean, myself in my work, right? You're creating this brand and the ethos of it, of what you are and who you are. And it's kind of lofty, right? Yeah. It's like, it's hard to put that into like terms when you're telling like salespeople or like data people exactly like this is brand, this is not on brand. How do you convey those messages to your team and the widespread team, especially Kroger being massive, who you are and like getting that message out and then having them believe it?
So at Kroger, the brand messaging that we pivoted to, the campaign was called Fresh for Everyone. So really putting a stake in the ground around fresh food and democratizing that. Prior to that, Kroger always had done fresh. It's a grocery store, but it was very high-low, promotional driven. You know, we had everything in the weekly advertising of like patio sets to avocados to laundry detergent. And the prioritization exercise, to your point, is hard. The way that we got everybody lined up against fresh was actually using the data. So if you look at what drives the trip, if you look at what drives the choice of retailer, like if you just think about a grocery store, the one thing that's different one to another is the fresh food. Like the bottle of Tide is the same wherever you go, much to P&G's credit on that. So we were able to use the data to say, look, this is the thing that's going to drive customer choice. It's the thing that's going to drive traffic. That rising tide of traffic will lift the other boats. So we're still going to sell paper towels and laundry detergent and all of that. People will put it in the cart when they come in. And then we had the beauty of a really great data science team who then helped stand up measurement along the way to show that we were making progress and it was driving sales.
And what like key stakeholders did you have to convince there?
Oh, well, it's a huge company. A few things. So one, the executive leadership team. So Kroger is very promote from within, especially sort of on stores and merchandising. You have people who've been with the company a really long time, who know grocery inside and out. And we were driving a lot of change. Kroger had never had a brand marketing team before we did this. There had never been an external agency partner. There'd never actually been a campaign. So it was a lot of change for people to ingest. And luckily I had great support from a couple of the senior officers who really got it and helped to pave the way. And part of it honestly was like making it cool, just on a human level.
How do you make groceries cool?
Well, we tried to make the marketing cool. And you can argue if you think it's cool or not, but the campaign we came with was an animated campaign. So we also had to sell people on like, it's going to be a cartoon, which is interesting to talk to.
Was there a mascot or no?
So it's a whole family of Krogies. So we created a whole world of like Kroger people to represent customers and associates. But we did little things like allow the associates to Krogi themselves. So think how you build like a Memoji.
Sure, yeah,
like that
like
idea.
A me or whatever.
You got it. Finding ways, like we did some contests where we had store associates actually in the ad. So we tried to make it not like marketing's thing that we're pushing out, but to actually bring everybody along with us and make it more fun and engaging. And yeah, so it was great. We did the whole like Lower Than Low with the Flow Rida song, which our associates thought was hysterical.
Yeah,
so just stuff like that made it feel fresh, different, like it was cutting through sort of the sea of sameness of all the grocery ads that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, because it's such a, it's such an important category, but it's also everybody, similar to P&G. I feel like there's an underlying theme, and we'll get into Michael's, which is a little different, but Kroger appeals to everybody. You need to market to literally anybody who eats food, which is hopefully everybody. Yeah.
Hopefully everybody. Yeah.
With one more question on Kroger before we get into Michael's, like, I'm curious how you, and if there was anything, because you have so many employees who are in the store who are employed by Kroger when it comes to the stockers, the delivery people, the cashiers, right? How do you explain to them what a Kroger employee should stand for? And was that part of your role at Kroger?
So we partnered with the head of operations on that. And the same is true at Michael's. So think like the team responsible for the stores, basically, in corporate affairs, which is like the associate communications group, where we thought about it from a brand point of view of like, okay, if we're fresh for everyone, how does that need to show up in the store? And what is the role of an associate? So for example, Kroger has a fresh guarantee. So if you buy something and it's not as fresh as you want, you can bring it back to the store. Well, that relies on a good experience with the store associate who then needs to take the thing back and make it right with that guarantee. They had a whole initiative around like fresh and friendly, which really was driven by the stores team, but we worked really closely with them to align, like if we're going to be all about fresh for everyone, how does that then translate into what we're asking of store associates? I will say it's true of all retail. We see it at Michael's as well. There's a lot of turnover in the store associate population, and they have a lot on their plates. If you think about, even they are the backbone, right? They're like at Michael's, they're unloading the truck first thing in the morning. They're restocking the shelves. They're checking people out. They're answering all the questions, and they have a lot going on. So we cannot overload them with like, here are the 17 things you need to do to support the marketing. It really needs to be like very high level, 2 or 3 points of like, these are the behaviors you need to exhibit. So we give enough context about why we're doing things, but a lot of it is like, what are we asking you to do? Like make eye contact with each customer, or at Michael's, there's a lot about helping people figure out like, what can I help you make today? So usually they're working on some type of project or they're looking for a project. So how can we actually show up and be helpful to them getting it done? But if we try to overload them with all the reasons of our campaign, like it'll just totally get lost.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm stoked to get into Michael's, and I have to dedicate this episode to my mom, who brought me to Michael's all the time as a kid to get little lanyards, and she was an artist herself, so we would go all the time. So when I knew that I booked you, I was like super stoked to just, because I have very fond memories as a child going to Michael's and picking out the arts and crafts stuff. So what about Michael's, like what made that the right call for you, right? You've always been in kind of more of Kroger and P&G can go more synonymous with each other than Michael's, but how did that opportunity come up, and what made it the right move?
Yeah, so I think kind of the same thing. So someone had reached out to me about the Michael's role. I had only ever done 2 really big companies, and we'd sort of finished a phase of the transformation journey at Kroger. We'd relaunched the campaign. We'd done a lot of media transformation, a lot of personalization, and the opportunity came up to try something new. Michael's is private equity owned, which was a totally new space for me. They were at a point in the journey. Apollo had purchased Michael's a year before I got there, basically. So
and for our listeners, Apollo is a holding company, or?
Yes, private equity.
Private equity, okay.
So they bought Michael's out, took the company private, now fully owned by them, brought in a lot of new leadership really to transform the business and the company. And they had been working for about a year on getting the foundations right. So thinking about the supply chain, the store operations, like really getting it running well, is sort of what the leadership team did the year before I got there. And then we were expanding into a number of growth initiatives, and sort of marketing then needed to be a piece of that on like, how do we now tell the story of this really transformed business? Michael's turns 50 this year. So yeah, it's really exciting. But it's kind of also an important time to say, if we want to be here for the next 50 years, we have to evolve. And we need to look at the marketing as a part of that to make sure we're telling the right story. So as usual, I was like chasing the change a little bit of like white sheet of paper, what should we do with this brand? with a big white sheet of paper in terms of where we could go, which was exciting to me.
Yeah, because I remember, I mean, at least growing up, Michael's had been very, like, it was antiquated, and like it was a little bit just like arts and crafts store, and there wasn't any like pizzazz behind it. But like, I'm curious, now that you're here, like, how do you define change and evolution at Michael's?
So we've looked at it in a couple of ways. So one, there's the change, like I said, on the foundation of, to your point, making sure it's modernized. It's a good, solid customer experience if you come into the store or you shop on our website. We actually relaunched our website the beginning of this year to have it
Congrats,
be simplified.
I just launched a website, so I understand how...
it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And it takes an army to do it well, have it go smoothly.
Just make it pop.
Right, you just flip the switch, right? And then it all works.
Yeah,
it's going to be great. So there was a lot of that work. But then a lot of it in my world has been about getting, again, the audience right. So who should our customer be? What business should we be in? So while our heritage is in arts and crafts, most creative people today, especially younger ones, will not describe what they do as arts and crafts, right? They'll say, I do creative projects, or I'm a painter, I'm a knitter, I crochet. And so there first needed to be a setback on, like, what is the business that we're in, which needs to be more about broader creativity. So yes, we support people who want to make and do arts and crafts projects, but also decorating is a big piece of our business. Like right now it's Halloween. Our customers love Halloween. They're super passionate about it. And that is an expression of creativity when you like deck out your house like the spookiest house on the block. Custom frame is a big piece of our business. And so we've tried to cast the net wider to really encompass all creative people and all creative needs, to then build the ecosystem with the stronger foundation and then our growth initiatives to really meet people wherever they are in the cycle. So if you're a beginner just learning some creative project for the first time, all the way to someone who might be a pro
hundreds of
selling
thousands of
your
dollars
stuff.
or whatever it is. Very cool. And so you talked about modernizing the stores. How have you gone about that?
So a lot of the work in the stores has been some simple things, which are not inherently simple, but like self-checkout. Checkout had been a pain point. We heard feedback from customers that our checkout was too slow. So we've now introduced self-checkout. It's in 300 stores and continuing to expand. A lot of it was about getting the assortment right, cleaning up the signage, so that it's actually clear what's where and what the price is on the thing that's on the end cap, like kind of basics of blocking and tackling, and then bringing in experiential, right? We're a creative brand, we're a creative retailer, so bringing more classes and events into our store. So like every Sunday we do a free make break that's very family and kind of kid focused, where you can bring your kids and do like just a little project on a Sunday afternoon for free, all the way up to like we have classrooms in most of our stores where you can take a more advanced class, which might be something like learning a more advanced like knitting project or wood burning or oil painting from someone who's sort of a more professional creator.
Talk to me about loyalty and how important that is when you were, because I feel like at least my mom, she was extremely loyal to Michael's, like, and would always go in at least once a week. And I'm sure a lot of people are,
That's awesome.
I'm sure a lot of people are like her who like, you know, it's usually not a one-time buyer, right?
Yes.
Yep. How do you go about like rewarding your customers for having that brand affinity?
Yeah, so we relaunched our loyalty program May of 22, so just a little over a year ago.
So pretty new.
Yeah, pretty recently.
Yeah.
And Michael's had a loyalty program longer term, but we heard it was a little confusing. So customers would get rewards. They didn't exactly know how they got them. It was very CRM driven. And we went to a much simpler program, which is just you get 3% or 6% back every day, depending how much you spend in a year. Or if you have our credit card, you get 9% back on every transaction. And then there will be, you know, maybe some promotions or things where you could get, you know, a little bit more than that, you know, at like a CRM off or something like that. But literally it is giving people value every day. And then also recognizing their loyalty. So recognizing them as a 6% loyalty member. You know, we spend time also thinking about new products and innovation. So how do we make sure you're part of our loyalty program? We should talk to you like we know you. So if I know you at like your mom who was coming in that frequently, we probably would see a pattern of like, if she was a yarn person, like what did she make?
Yarn and then a lot of paper mache.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. So we would know, okay, this looks like someone who likes to create in these two areas. I should probably be sending more of like right now as we're going into fall.
Versus less gardening or whatever it
Yes,
is.
exactly.
Or like Halloween
resin
wasn't,
products or
yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
So I think there's as much the give and take of giving the value back,
cool.
but some of the value is intangible. It's like actually making people feel like you know them, you appreciate them, and send them stuff that's relevant.
That also goes to the cashiers and stuff. If they know and they recognize somebody, like keep on, if you know the salesperson checking you out, you're going to come back and have like a nice interaction because people are craving that. With, online buying being way higher, I feel like there's still a lot of brick and mortars stores for Michaels.
Absolutely.
Just driving around, I see them everywhere compared to like a lot of, let's say, Blockbuster, which is now shut down. How do you manage the pros and cons of both and change your marketing differently?
Yeah, so one, we think of it as an ecosystem where the two need to work together. And we are actually still opening new stores. So we're actually in a growth mode on our stores as well as on the e-com side.
I was curious about that because I was going to make the inference that I feel like Michael's is one of the only stores where it like makes a lot of sense to have a brick and mortar because you need that quick things more than like, I don't know, there's a lot that have just failed.
Yeah, and people like to come in. Right, most people, they'll say like, oh, Michael's is my happy place. I like to go browse.
Sure.
And it's a creative space. So people like to go see the different yarns. They want to touch it. They want to see what the texture is. And we've expanded into small format, which has allowed us to get into some smaller markets where we previously weren't. So it allows us to serve new groups of people than we could. E-com is also super important. We actually launched our third-party marketplace business in February this year, which as a specialty sort of creative retailer is a really big deal because you can think about the long tail of painting supplies or crochet supplies or whatever it is. You can get very specialized. Sure. So the e-com sort of endless aisle piece plays a huge role for us, especially as people get more advanced in their craft. Sometimes they want some specialized things that might not make sense for us to have, especially in a small format store. But it allows us to offer those things in a way that people can easily get them shipped. And we do pick up in store as well. So you can do like place an order now, and then you could go pick it up in an hour, at the store down the road from you.
It's funny. I feel like my mom is an underlying theme of this episode because she loved Michael so much, but she also loved TJ Maxx. That was like also, and similar branding. How much crossover do you have with like learning from other CMOs who might have a similar audience into your kind of just learnings and strategy?
So I love to connect with other people. It's part of why I like things like Brand Week. I will also say the P&G network has served me very well. Yep. That I found if you reach out to someone, like I did this a lot in my early days at Kroger, like figuring out the rebrand, and was shocked at how many people were willing to like get on the phone or like meet me for a coffee to give advice. Because odds are if you're facing a problem, someone else has probably faced it or has an analog or some bit of advice of like, maybe you'd think about it this way or that way. I think especially right now for CMOs, there are also some sticky industry things that it's good for us to connect on, right? So things like privacy, like is there going to be a cookieless future if the cookies ever go away?
Not with the fortune cookies.
Yeah, not with the fortune cookies. There's cookies forever. So, I think there are some of those things like talent retention and development. Sure. Return to office has been a hot one. So I think sometimes, especially as you get more senior, I always try to listen to people on my team, but sometimes people won't always tell it to you straight. So it's helpful to have peers who are outside the situation to just say, hey, I'm thinking through this thing. I might be missing it. What do you see? What have you learned? I very much value the opportunities to do that.
Absolutely. One last question before we hit our quick question round. I want to ask you, like, as a woman in a leadership role, we've been trying to highlight more women who have just climbed the ranks and reached their career goals. Like, what advice would you give to somebody who, might be a 21-year-old woman who wants to be in marketing and be a complete badass like yourself? Like, what would you tell them, or what advice would you give yourself if you were to go back and, be in your early 20s?
Yeah. One, I would say learn everything you can. Take advantage of all the situations that you're in, the people that you work with, to soak up as much learning as you can, and go for it a bit before you're ready. I think a lot of times, even I will get in my own head, and there's a lot of, I think, data to support the imposter syndrome thing with women, that we tend to be like, if there are 10 qualifications for this job, I need to have all 10, probably plus a few, when realistically, you probably have amazing strengths in maybe 5 of those, and then you have some gaps that you're gonna fill as you get there, and just have the confidence to lean in and give it a shot. And frankly, I think what served me well is when I've done that is the piece of learning from other people, whether that's someone on my team, whether that's someone who I maybe worked with previously, who I know has experience, an agency person, to ask questions, even like, don't worry about looking dumb. I could tell you, especially in like some of the early days when I moved to marketing, I probably asked a lot of very dumb media questions and had a very wonderful media leader who was so patient to explain all of it. And then once you've got it, now you can run really fast. But I think sometimes we hesitate to go for it, and to ask the questions that probably other people also have, but aren't brave enough to actually ask.
I think that's awesome advice. And I love that, staying in the deep end and just pushing yourself when you may not know, be ready. And I love what you said too earlier about, you weren't 100% sure, right, about taking the jump, and it worked out. So I think that's a great place to start our quick question round and start wrapping up this episode. So today's quick question round is brought to you by Open Fortune. I want you to forget everything that you know about the traditional fortune cookie. Open Fortune has taken the reins and flipped the fortune cookie on its head by creating partnerships with 47,000 restaurants, reaching 99% of zip codes, and having over 90% opening up their ads in fortune cookies. But before you say, oh, Open Fortune is ruining the fortune cookie, they've introduced over 3,000 new fortunes in the last 3 months, and have been just getting rave reviews from a ton of consumers. So check them out, openfortune.com, and thank you for making this possible. So the quick question round. We are going to open this one fortune up. I don't eat fortune cookies either. I tried making it more on brand when I would like eat and have it be my while I'm doing work snack, because one of the perks that they gave us was unlimited fortune cookies. But we're gonna open up our fortunes and we're gonna see if they are related to what we just spoke about. And we didn't plant these. So who's?
No way, really?
No. So what did it say?
Greatness is closer than you once thought.
There you go.
I'll take that. Okay.
And who's the brand?
Northern Arizona University. Move your career forward.
Go Lumberjacks. Ooh, this is a good fortune for today. It says things happen fast, period, react, period. So, and weather bug. So I'm reacting fast. We're getting it in. So let's end with the quick question round. Again, thank you for Open Fortune for making today possible. Okay, we got 10 questions we're going to throw at you quick. Just react, left, right, as fast as you can. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with, dead or alive?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, you're a Swiftie.
Oh,
Part of the cult.
And I'm just fascinated by her. I think what she has built is incredible. It's inspirational. I have an 11-year-old daughter. And I think she has just become such a positive female role model for these girls. Like, love it.
New Michaels collab, potentially?
I mean, in my dreams, if she's listening, yes, we would love that.
Favorite city in the world?
New York.
Manhattan or Brooklyn?
Manhattan.
I'm a Brooklyn guy. It's all right, though. We can still be friends. Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
No.
It is. He's
Smelly feet.
Yeah, I say it's okay. Is it? Do I do it? No. But if you want
to,
if it's really cold. Favorite Miami, Ohio graduate?
Oh, do we have? I don't know that we have. That's bad that I can't think of any famous ones.
All right, let's look some up. We're going to do this real time.
All right, let's do it.
I'm going to give you an option.
And don't tell me Ben Roethlisberger. That's the one everybody knows.
You can't. We got a couple. President Benjamin Harrison.
Okay, I feel like that's going back.
Former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan.
Okay, I did know that. Limited list.
I think you could say, all right, who's your freshman year roommate or good friend?
Oh, my freshman year roommate, her name is Ashley Rozier. And we lived together for 6 years.
Okay, so Ashley by far.
Yes, by far. And she was my random roommate my freshman year. We both went to P&G.
Amazing.
Godmother of my kids. She actually still works at P&G. She's leading a big piece of their media business. Yes, you should. She's awesome.
Absolutely. In 40 years, what will people be nostalgic for?
Maybe a car, that you put gas in.
I agree. Favorite rom-com?
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
So good. What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
To smile more, which was
The worst.
advice from someone senior to me.
A white male.
Yeah.
What's in one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
The place to learn anything.
Sweet. And in 2033, where can we catch you?
Hopefully doing interesting, creative work on a business somewhere, hanging out with my kids, which is weird to think of, like, actually there'll be none of them living with me then. That's sad. But yeah, hopefully enjoying life.
Amazing. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for hopping on the pod.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.